Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of the Prairie Lights podcast. My name is Matt. Joining me this evening is our special guest, AJ Oetman, director of The Wolf's Robe and Community Watch.
Hey, Matt. Good to be here with you.
Good to be with you. Anybody listening to this right now, if you listen to our last podcast with Benito Garcia, you know that we had some difficulties with Josh. Josh has been unable to get on Skype for whatever reason, and once again we tried to bring him on this evening, and my recording software just will not play ball with him for some reason. I guess it's got a grievance against Josh. So no Josh again tonight. Hopefully at some point in the future we'll be able to bring him back on the show. But until then, it's just going to be me. And AJ, we're going to just have a fun little chat this evening about movies.
Cool.
You like movies, right?
My favorite thing. Absolutely. Yeah, that's why we're in independent filmmaking and make no money, but we just love it so much that we got to do movies. So, yeah.
Yep. Some people.
That's right. Yeah.
And as we do with every show, at the beginning of every show, just a few pieces of house cleaning that I want to get to before we dive into discussion of Community Watch and The Wolf's Robe. Number one, don't forget, everybody out there, that we have a special Blu-ray release screening of Flatwater Terrors that's happening Friday, July 29th at 9 o'clock at the Alamo Draft House in Omaha. We're going to have all of the filmmakers present for a Q&A. Anybody who attends gets a free 11x17 movie poster that was done up by Heather Waite. That's really, really sweet. The Blu-rays will be there. Purchasing of the Blu-rays, all proceeds will be donated to Nebraska Independent Film Projects along with the Eastern Nebraska Film Office. Those are two film organizations chosen by the filmmakers themselves. So please come out. You can go to Alamo Draft House website right now and order your tickets. Get tickets for that, and should be a good time. So don't forget about that. The other thing I want to mention is, as I mentioned at every show, tickets to the Prairie Lights Film Festival are on sale right now. You can go to prairielightsfilmfest.com, head over to the tickets tab at the top of the menu bar, and you can get a weekend pass for $10, and that $10 includes access to all 38 movies. You can see all 38 movies for $10. You'll get access to all the Q&As, free popcorn, free soda, 25% off at Bonsai, Sin City Grill, Chocolate Bar. You get free DVD sampler. You get free access to the rock show after party on Saturday night at Bonsai. Just a million awesome things, and you can lock that in for $10 right now. And I would encourage anybody listening to order your tickets now up front, because that helps us sort of figure out how many DVD samplers we have to print up before the festival, because I don't want to get into a situation where a million people show up on Friday and we didn't print up enough discs. So please go order your weekend passes, even if you're only planning for one day, because even if you only come for like a Saturday, for example, you're going to get a free DVD and, all the discounts at the restaurants and stuff for all day, which will definitely make up for that extra $5. And if you just buy a day pass, you don't get any of that cool stuff. So weekend pass is where it's at. Be sure to get it. Now, let's talk to AJ. AJ's here.
All right.
Let's talk to you. Let's start this very informally. Like, what have you been up to lately? You've got some film stuff in the works. Like, just what's been going on with you in the last month or two?
Well, we've finished The Wolf's Robe, our feature, and we're super stoked to have it at Prairie Lights. We're premiering it at the Ross Theater in Lincoln, August 11 at 7 p.m. So we're kind of gearing up for that, as well as we're going to be showing it regionally in different towns around the state, the surrounding states. So I've just been kind of in communication with theaters and festivals and trying to figure all that out, as well as I work at the Haymarket Theater in Lincoln. So during the summer session, we're right now directing kids' theater. So it's good. It's kind of a mix right now between producing on the film end and then directing on the theater side.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it. You've got two films that are screening at Prairie Lights this year, and they'll both be screening on Saturday. You can go to prairielightsfilmfest.com. The entire schedule for the 4th Annual Prairie Lights Film Festival is up. And we have Community Watch that's screening at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday, and it's going to be followed by Tom Lombard's Jesse's Chili, which I've been told by him there's going to be like some commercials and stuff that are part of that relate to Community Watch and Wolf's Robe and stuff like that. And then the Wolf's Robe will screen after that at 6:30, and then we'll have Q&As with both you and Tom right after that. So let's just, we'll start at the 5:30 Community Watch. Tell us a little bit about Community Watch. What's that all about?
So Community Watch is just a silly sitcom about rednecks who solve crimes. I had come up with the idea because I had lived with my parents for a few months after going to college and working for a number of years, and I was there to finish this book. And as many people know, that is always a mistake to move back in with your parents. And it was at a time where they live in this little farming community, and someone was going around, and I don't think they figured out who it was, and was stealing just this random stuff, like brass from some, I don't know, piece of farm equipment, or air hoses, or just, it was like silly stuff. I mean, I know it's worth a lot, but it was just so completely random that anyway, and they pulled together this Community Watch, and I sat in on the meeting as kind of the representative for my family, and it was just so comical that I came up with this script. And then when I came back to Lincoln, we got some people together in Panama, Nebraska, and shot it. One of the funnest projects I've ever been on. We laughed every single night, almost from the start to the finish of it. It was so fun.
Yeah. And I guess my poor duties as a host, I always feel like I get ahead of myself. What sort of got you into movies in the first place? Like, every filmmaker has, that movie or something that's like, oh yeah, I saw this, and that's what made me want to become a filmmaker, or want to get into the movie business or whatever. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, well, I can remember literally, from my earliest memories, wanting to create stories. Primarily film, I think, because that was the main media that was presented to me at home. My family's not huge readers, but, I mean, they do read some. And so, I mean, I remember I'd be out on our farm just imagining all these stories. And my dad is a huge storyteller, so even before we really saw any type of movies or whatnot, because we were just so young, he would be telling my sister and me stories before we'd go to bed. And oftentimes would make them really interactive, where we would have to fill in pieces of the stories ourselves. And so I've just always wanted to do it my whole life. And so I had decided after leaving college, I got my degree in English Ed because I was convinced to do the safe option, which I now don't think is smart, but that's what I did. And when I was about to get a master's in film, I just did some research into it and felt that kind of guerrilla filmmaking style would be the smarter financial investment. And so when I was able to partner with Carissa Hosey, who's now my co-producer and cinematographer and a lot of things, we just kind of hit the ground running and have learned as we go, essentially.
So you sort of have a background in writing and wanting to tell stories and whatnot, but what was sort of like the leap of faith you made into, like, I want to direct movies?
Right. I guess it would be, so like I said, I mean, I've always wanted to do that. And in college, since I got my degree in English Ed and felt competent enough as a writer, I had been published in a couple of magazines, little magazines, but still, had written some short stories, written a small book, but a book, and I felt like, okay, it's time. It's at the time in my life that I said I was going to try this directing thing. And when I was living at home, actually, during that whole Community Watch fiasco, I just tooled around the internet and found this site where they were basically giving courses on how you could become a director filmmaker without film school. And so I took that course and just felt, you know what, I've got to do this. I've directed theater before. I've written. I know how to do this. And so I dove into Community Watch as a full-length film, and then once we dove in, the realities of writing a chase scene and having an under $10,000 budget isn't realistic, and so we trimmed it down to a sitcom.
Yeah. I remember it was Community Watch the first film you ever directed then? Or first film you made, or had you made stuff before then?
Well, I mean, like, I had some really bad films as a kid with my buddies, and Carissa and I have a really, like, bad little commercial we had made out at summer camp. But Community Watch was the first serious project where, we did all the steps from, writing it, editing it, storyboarding it, really, trying to make it a polished piece.
Yeah. I remember
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember because I had made this really crappy short film in high school called A Ripper Runs Through It, which I had originally had grand ambitions for, and then when you're on set the first time you're ever making a movie, you're like, oh my god, like I can't do half of this stuff. It turns into like a 5-minute movie real quick. And I remember the first time when I shot The Grand Horror, which was the first film, like real thing, I was like, okay, let's try to do this, and we went in for a feature-length film. The first thing we ever really tried to make was a feature-length film, and it took us like, I don't know, 6 months, every weekend for 6 months just to get the thing finished. I remember still having to compromise on a million things that were in the script just because it was like, oh my god, it's so tough. It's so tough.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think just in your head you think, oh, like, this is going to be so simple. It's just a chase scene. I can drive a car, and then once you get into the thick of it, you realize, whoa, like, this is way too crazy. Yeah.
What's the craziest thing that's ever happened to you on set while directing a movie?
Probably craziest in terms of, like, scared for people's safety. Well, there's two that come to mind. One, during Community Watch, we have a shot where this girl pulls a shotgun out to shoot someone. And our lead actor, Troy Parker, he jumps on to Kelby Phillips, his supporting actress. Well, this is my first film. Like, we were not being safe enough. And I'm literally on the floor to catch them because I had been involved in tumbling and gymnastics and all this stuff. And so I felt competent enough to catch them. Well, I caught them, but then he was too close to the wall, and his shoulder went through the drywall.
Ooh, wow.
So that weekend I was patching drywall, which was awesome since we didn't own the location. So that was interesting. The second one that would be close to that was during the Wolf's Robe. We had a church scene, well, a few of them actually, but out in Waverly at Camp Creek, and it was middle of July or into July. Well, yeah, early July. Super hot, 90-some degrees. But it was a night scene, so we had blacked out all the windows and turned off the air so it wouldn't pick up in our audio. And we had almost 60 people there with all our extras and crew and these super hot construction lights because they're affordable. It was so hot that we had actors get sick. And we had some people there who were pushing 90, so that probably wasn't the safest thing.
Yeah, safety on micro-budget movies is always an interesting thing. The two things that come to mind, in my filmmaking career, both involve Jasmine Van Houten, who's also in The Wolf's Robe.
Mm-hmm. I have heard these stories.
Yeah, these stories. I mean, I don't want to go too deep into these stories, but sometimes you're not thinking about the safety aspect of it. You're like, because you're so in tune, like, I got to get the shot, where you're thinking about a million different things as a director, and then it's like when something super dangerous happens, you almost don't recognize it at first. You're just kind of like, oh, okay, this is a good performance, and then you're like, oh my god, this person almost died.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's micro budget filmmaking is a very interesting, sometimes scary endeavor. But I mean, I think most people would say it was worth it at the end.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, and I think, the benefit, too, for actors who kind of lived through that, like, by the time Jasmine reached us after working with you for a while, she was battle-hardened. I mean, she was literally ready for anything. And I think because of that, she was really great to work with. Whereas some actors that just aren't used to guerrilla filmmaking are just aren't quite ready for some of the stuff that we try and do. So, yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about The Wolf's Robe. Now, this is the big one, right? I want to congratulate you for your the success that your world premiere at the Ross is having.
Yeah.
First of all, before we forget, because I'm bad at remembering to tell people, hey, plug your shit at the end of the episode. The tickets are currently on sale for that, right? So why don't you tell a little bit about where people can go to get that?
Absolutely. So The Wolf's Robe, and that's our feature film. It's a dramatic comedy about an atheistic magician who runs from the cops, hides out in this small Nebraskan town by pretending to be their new minister. And this film, you can find out all about it on our website, which is thewolfsrobemovie.com, and that has our trailer, everything. And just on that site, if you click on the link that says festivals and screenings, you can click there, and you can get your tickets to Prairie Lights, or click on our world premiere, and you can buy your tickets now for August 11, 7 p.m. at the Mary Ripper Ross Theater in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Which is an awesome theater, by the way.
It really is. And, yeah, we were blown away because we had started off in their smaller theater, and we sold out in 3 days. And so, fortunately, the director there was helpful enough to be able to boost us to a theater that can hold over double that. And so we have about 90 tickets left until we'll break fire codes. So, and we haven't put up a single poster, so get your tickets now.
I do have my ticket, so
yes,
I'm excited to attend. So
awesome.
It'll be very, very cool. Okay, well, tell us a little bit about The Wolf's Robe. Sort of, tell us the genesis of this storyline. Why did you decide that this was a story you wanted to tell?
Yes. Well, after the project of Community Watch, I realized the need to build a feature-length script that you can shoot. And so I wrote it intentionally with locations that I knew I had available, as well as this group of people that I worked with in Community Watch. They were just so much fun to work with. I really wanted to work with a lot of them again. So I went into it thinking, okay, I want to create parts for a few people. It needs to be in these locations. And I had worked at a summer camp in Alaska where I had met my now co-producer, Carissa. And I had played at there, because it's a religious camp, so I had played this devil character, this hunter, and I had always wanted to put him in some type of film, just that, and I couldn't quite figure out how to do it. Well, then, after I had shot Community Watch, and I was like, well, I want to work with these people, I want it to be in Nebraska, but I don't really want to keep with the just straight redneck thing anymore. And then it hit me to bring this kind of devil, kind of deceiver type character into a small community in Nebraska and just see what that would look like. And so that was kind of the genesis of this story.
Okay, interesting. Now, you did something sort of interesting during the creation of this movie, and this is a little bit sort of post-production wise, but something that stands out to me is you had multiple sort of like screenings of it to get feedback from people, which I thought was really interesting, because I know a lot of filmmakers around here don't do that sort of thing. It's almost like, it's my movie, I'm going to make the movie the way I originally intended it. However, you did multiple screenings to sort of get feedback from, test screenings from audiences of what worked and what didn't work and stuff like that. What was sort of like the mentality of doing something that way as opposed to just sort of putting the movie that sort of you wanted out on screen?
Yeah, here's what I'd say. I did put out the film I wanted, and I think part of this was just my writing background and the teachers who taught me how to write well. I am a huge believer in listening to your audience and a huge believer in listening to your fellow collaborators. And that doesn't mean that you abandon your ideas. I mean, there are certain things when I'm approaching a film where I just won't bend on them. And that's something that, is important to me. But what I found is, we did 10 editing screeners last summer where we had audiences come in, give feedback, and then they'd fill out a little form. And what I found is you find so many of the things in your work that you yourself couldn't catch. It's like these fresh eyes where I know during our screeners, kind of the money that our character Victor is taking from the town got a bit murky. And me as the writer, I mean, I know exactly how much he's taking and where it's going and who's it going to, but the difference is it's in my mind. It's not in my audience's mind. And so by doing the editing screeners, I was able to see, okay, did I connect A to B to C to D? And that's just kind of how I work. I mean, even when I was writing the script, I mean, I had 15 drafts, and I think 18 people. Like, I had 18 different eyes see it, and I still now feel like it needed an additional draft, which I know is not very common in the independent world here, but
right, yeah.
I'm just a huge believer in that, and it's not about, I think this notion that getting feedback makes you abandon your ideas is just juvenile, quite frankly. I mean, you can make a choice after feedback whether to abandon it or not, and you can make a choice to accept that criticism or reject it, but I feel like if my work is going to be great, I have to be a big enough person to listen and then to make my own judgment on what I do with that.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I know that because there's sort of like that balance you try to strike. It's like, okay, this is the movie. Like, you might do a cut of a movie, like, oh man, I really like this cut, and then you show it to someone, and then or 2, 3, 4 different people, and they all have different things that they dislike about it. Like, oh, well, you need to change this, or you need to change this, and you need to change this. And I think a lot of filmmakers sort of get in this mindset of like, well, if I start making too many changes based on what other people are saying, then somehow it's no longer their movie anymore. Mm-hmm. You're sort of making a movie for the audience as opposed to making the movie that you wanted to make initially. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it is striking a balance there. I mean, I know filmmakers around here who are like, never will I do a test screening at all. And then I know filmmakers like you who like do multiple test screenings to get that stuff. And I think one of the great things about the micro budget indie scene is that there are so many different ways to tackle the same goal, which is everybody wants the best product that they can possibly get. And I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it. Me personally, I am completely opposite of you. I don't even let people read my scripts until it's like a week before we're ready to start shooting. I'm like, okay, here's the draft. Like the ones that I really super care about and I write it myself, I'm very picky in that this is what I want. And then when you get on set and you realize, a million things go wrong and you can't get what you actually wanted, that's when, for me anyway, the bitterness comes into play, and it's like, Right. But yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it's actually brave. I think you're incredibly brave in that respect, because I don't know many filmmakers that go out and do that. I think you might be the only person I know around here anyway that intentionally says, hey, yeah, here's my movie, show it to a bunch of people and like tell me what's wrong with it. Because it takes a certain type of person who's not going to be afraid to get criticism to do that. And I think a lot of filmmakers are a little afraid to get criticism, honestly, because criticism, depending on how it's given, can hurt. Right. It's kind of like, oh man, I did all this stuff for this movie, and I want the people who put in all their hard work and time on this movie to help me do this. I want it to be good for them. But then when someone's telling you, oh man, you totally botched that, oh man, the film's not really that good, it's scary, it hurts, and you don't want to disappoint and let people down. But on the other hand, sometimes it's probably good to do that because you'll get a better film in the end.
Well, and my kind of thought on it, too, is even, like, let's say I did an editing screener, and I always look for what does the critical mass see as something that's confusing? But even if, say, everyone says, okay, the money thing is confusing, where's Victor taking this money? What's he doing with it? I would, like, let's say I just rejected that and said, I don't care. I'm going to shoot this film the way I want to shoot it. Even still, I think it's advantageous to have heard that, because then when you premiere it, oh, like I already know what people are going to be confused on. Like, I already know that answer. And I also think it's better, I would much rather hear constructive, well, even just straight criticism, even if it's not constructive, from people one-on-one or from people I know, rather than getting a write-up in the Journal Star after it has premiered. about how terrible something is or how overlooked something is when I could have avoided that. And so, I don't know. It's tough and it's a lot of work.
But I mean, I think that's the thing. It's like you make great points here. It's nothing that I would do myself, just because I think those are my own cinematic insecurities, right? Because I'm one of those filmmakers like, oh man, I don't want to give out this script and have a bunch of people tell me all this time I spent on it was pointless and it needs to be changed and stuff. And I think it's refreshing that you are willing to go out there and be like, hey, yeah, tell me these things. I want to know. So you're unique in that respect.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
So for the Wolf's Robe, let's talk a little bit about the production of Wolf's Robe. First of all, what's it like for those people listening who aren't in Nebraska? I've actually gotten some emails from people who are like, oh, this is a really interesting podcast. I don't live in Nebraska, but I know of people in the area making movies, and this has sort of like introduced them to a filmmaking scene around here. What's some of the challenges with filming a micro-budget movie in Nebraska in particular?
Yeah, I think the number one thing people are going to say is money, and I hate to be that person that's just going to blame all your woes on money, but it really is challenging when, you and your co-producer work for nonprofits and are literally self-funding a project that takes you years. I mean, just committing to that is hard. Which is probably going to be the same of most places in the Midwest or just anyone doing guerrilla filmmaking. I think Nebraska, some of the challenges I found is Lincoln has, which is where I live. I don't live in Omaha for those listening from Omaha. Lincoln has a huge amount of theater in it, which is awesome. I mean, there's some play going on every single weekend or probably every day somewhere in the city all year. And so there are a lot of theater actors. However, for film, there's not as many. We fortunately had some really good luck going through Real People in Omaha, and they were really helpful, which is a talent agency. But what I found is a lot of times theater actors, it doesn't always necessarily cross over to film. I mean, we have worked with a lot of really good theater actors, but then you just kind of have to dial them back because they're used to speaking on a stage where they have to really project versus a film where it's right in front of your face. And so I think just finding really competent talent is challenging in and of itself.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And that, again, goes to money, too. But
yeah, and it's nothing against actual theater actors, because theater actors are some of the most interesting types of actors and sort of like the ballsiest actors you can be to sort of get up on stage. With the film, you can film something. If you botch your line, no one's going to know until the outtake reel on the DVD. No one cares. If you botch your line in a theater setting, everybody knows. Everybody laughs. Everybody's looking at you. The spotlight is literally on you in a theater setting. So I have immense respect for theatrical actors. But you're absolutely right. At least here in Lincoln, the vast majority of actors that are available are of a theater background, and it can be very, very difficult to sort of make them sort of understand the transition as to like, okay, you're not talking to the back of the audience here. You're talking like the camera's in a close-up, so you're literally talking. You can be quiet. You don't have to project.
Right.
And yeah, I found that to be sort of very difficult around here as well. A lot of UNL actors. They're great, but it's tough in a in a cinematic setting. And I also think one of the problems around here is there doesn't seem to be enough productions happening in Lincoln or education or training for the theatrical actors to sort of see what the differences are between cinematic acting and theatrical acting. I think if there were a much bigger community here, because I think that most films in Nebraska are sort of made in the Omaha area, and they don't have nearly as much problem with that in Omaha. But I do think if there was something for theatrical actors to, I don't know if it could be a mixer, it could be something like to get together with the people making films here in Lincoln to sort of be like, okay, this is sort of what we're looking for, some sort of training. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it goes back to casting, and because I think a mixer for sure would be good. And at the end of the day, I think for many theater actors to cross over, there just has to be more opportunities for film. What I've seen a lot of is the actors that are working with filmmakers are only doing that. But then the actors that are doing theater are only doing that. And I know a couple who are crossing over, and they're the best, quite frankly, in the state, I believe, because they're doing both. But I think both are being limited because on film sets in this state, most do not take the time to teach acting or coach acting. And so then you have this group of film actors who need additional training, who need additional skill sets, who could get that in the theater. But then you also have this group of theater actors who don't know these films exist, who aren't connected to any agency. And when they do get on a film set, the reverse problem is they got to dial everything back.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be more opportunity, and I think a lot of the independent films here need to cast more. And I know casting is a pain in the butt, and it's hard, but unless they want to reach past their own circle, I mean, you'd have to cast, you know?
Yeah, and that's you brought up two really interesting points. I've been on multiple, there's a lot of film auditions that take place at UNL, at the Temple building at UNL. I've sat in on multiple auditions that have been set up for different filmmakers there, and almost always barely anybody actually shows up for those because the theatrical actors around just for whatever reason do not know that there are auditions taking place. So just the simple fact of communication between those sort of two factions is a problem that needs to be fixed somehow. I mean, I don't know if there, it's a website that sort of combines, connects people or whatever it might be. I know that's a big problem, just people being unaware that these things happen. And in terms of casting, I think you're spot on with casting. It becomes really easy to just work with the people that you like.
Absolutely.
Because once you've been on a film set, you make friends. That's one of the great things about micro-budget cinema that I think is very undervalued by many people, or at least it's not in the forefront of how they think about things. When you work on a micro-budget movie and you get, 10, 15 people together, whatnot, whether they're your friends already or it might just be people that are coming to help you out, you make lifelong friends with these people. And basically it's like a full-time job to make this movie, and you have all these amazing experiences with these people, and then the next project you do, you remember, oh man, I had so much fun working with this person. Let's just cast them in this role again. And it becomes like you start working with the same people over and over, and I think that contributes to sort of almost like the clickiness nature of filmmaking around here. It's like this production company has this group of people that are loyal to them, and this production company has a group loyal to them, and it's almost like there's no cross-pollination happening between that stuff, or very minimal cross-pollination.
Absolutely. I kind of to tag on to that too, I've noticed that, like you said, every production house, but even in the theater companies, a lot of that happens where, the Haymarket, which is where I work at now, there's a pool of actors that will continue to come back there. But then the Playhouse across the city has a pool of actors that continues. And while there is some cross-pollination, it's very minimal. And I think you're right. Even myself, when people come to Prairie Lights and see our, 3-film block, I reuse people because they're my friends now, and I love working with them. And so, I'm kind of a hypocrite even in saying that.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like if you have a new movie, that person wants to be on it, and then you don't want to have to tell that person, I'm sorry, I don't have a place for you in this movie, because it almost feels like it's kind of a dick move, right? That's, to me anyway, it's how it sort of feels. It's like, oh, well, I'm sorry, person X, you were great, we're friends now, but I don't want to put you in this movie for whatever reason. I've had to have those conversations with people.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where I always encourage all local filmmakers around here to sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Expand your horizons. Get outside of your comfort zone. We're shooting a film in September called Blood Model. I have not worked with any of the actors on that. Like you were mentioning,
Cool.
you were mentioning Real People before. We actually went through Real People. We held auditions there, and almost the entire cast was cast from those Real People auditions.
Awesome.
So it's a cast of basically people I've never worked with before. We've gone out and I've gotten crew that some crew I've never worked with before, and it's going to be sort of like this big sort of production. But it took a little bit of like convincing for me to sort of dive into the deep end of the pool on that, because like, man, I can make this movie with my friends, but what's it going to be like to make it with people I don't know? But I think that all filmmakers need to make that leap at some point in time. I don't know.
And it's a hard balance, because then I think, there are 3 actors that you all will see at every single one of these films, and they're so much fun. And a part of me would just cry if I'm making a film in Nebraska and they don't, at least have like a bit part. But then on the flip side, our 2 leads, in The Wolf's Robe, we had never worked with them before, casted them through Real People, and now we're all great friends. So I think,
Yeah, and that's just that thing where it's like, man, it's nothing against the actors, but sometimes you just have to go out and do, try something new and bring in fresh talent for certain roles and stuff. Like, I have this bad habit. I don't know. I mean, you like to write. You're a writer. I have this really bad habit of when I'm writing a story, I have people in mind ahead of time. It's like...
Me too.
I have a specific muse, right, that I'm like, okay, this female character, I picture her in this role. And so when it comes down to casting, it's like, okay, well, do I just put this actor who's my friend in the role, or do I actually try to find someone who's the best actor in that role? And that becomes a problem, because then you got to sort of let go of a little piece of the idea that you originally had.
Yep. I completely, resonate with all of that.
It's tough. So let's get back to The Wolf's Robe. Like, how long did it take to film this? And just give us a few stories from the set, some interesting stories.
Absolutely. Okay, so The Wolf's Robe we filmed 2 summers ago. I was in pre-production for, including writing my writing my script, a solid 6 months. We shot every Sunday and Tuesday, which is a weird time frame, for the summer, for a solid 2.5 months. And then we would do some pickup shots during the week in the evenings. Then going from there, we edited it for about a year, and then got some additional pickup shots, did our test screeners, did about 10 of them. And then the past six to 8 months, we've just been locking our sound. We had an original score created for us by Garrett Hope, who is the best composer I know in the state. And we also corrected color, which... all of those things, when you've never done it on this level before, really take a lot of time.
Now, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject, but for the post-production process, is that stuff that you and Carissa are basically doing on your own, or is that stuff that you're sort of farming out to other people around the area?
So with sound design, we had some help. I know for like getting some ADR, some Foley, Richard Stripling helped us a lot, and he was really great. With composition, as I mentioned, we farmed that out with Garrett Hope. In terms of the actual cut, the color correction, a million other tweaks, that was all Carissa and I. We had a little help with sorting when it started by Erin Howard, who's also one of our leading actresses. But otherwise, it's pretty much been me and Carissa.
Yeah, and I think that's another avenue that I want to make sure anybody listening to this podcast understands. If you're not familiar with sort of like the micro-budget film process, not only is there a pre-production process that's usually the director and 1 or 2 other people, like that's like the core, right? You have 2 or 3 people that are the core of the project that will be there from the beginning all the way to the end. So not only do you have to do all the work in pre-production, but then when you have the production itself, that is a whole nother ball game, can of worms that's insane. But then the post-production process, I don't think people understand or appreciate how much time it goes into just editing a feature-length film, let alone all the color correction and sound and stuff. I mean, it's a years-long process.
Oh, yeah. We added up a rough estimate of our time, and if we were getting paid, I think it was like $15 an hour, which, is like semi-decent. I mean, we would hit six figures in our two. Literally, I mean, I leave my day job, and then I come here to our office and edit with Carissa. I may take one or two evenings off a week, but it's so much time. It boggles my mind. And I know that when we do this again, we'll be a lot faster. One, because, and going back to production, we shot so many takes, and especially with Community Watch. I mean, we cut it in about half when we went to the Wolf's Robe. And if we did a film again, we'll cut it in half again, because we had shot so much footage, just sorting took months. I mean, physical months, just to comb through all the footage we had.
Do you guys slate your takes, or do you
We
just
do. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we slate them.
Yeah, I had an interview with Benito last week. I think it was him. I was talking about how I hate slate. I can't
Really?
do it. I cannot do slate on movies. It drives me nuts.
Really?
I feel it's a total waste of time. Yeah, I hate it.
But then how do you? Well, I guess you could still organize stuff by the image numbers. So
I am very adept at being able to go through, because that's sort of how I film as well. I'm notorious for getting a million angles of a shot, because I like in the post-production process to have the maximum amount of footage available to me to edit how I want it.
Me too.
I'm always scared that if I only do one or two takes of something, 6 months down the road when I'm editing this, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I missed something that I needed. So I'm always like, hey, let's get this angle and this angle and this angle and this angle and this angle. Okay, now we'll move on to the next shot. But yeah, I think I want to say Isabel, we had, I think, 4 terabytes worth of footage that we shot, and none of it was slated. Not a single shot. We probably had 10,000 or more shots through the course of the entire movie of footage, and I went through all of it.
And that's why it took you 4 years. This all makes sense.
Yeah. But, okay, yeah.
I was on to give a shout-out to 2 really great filmmakers who are also going to be at Prairie Lights, Dorothy Boream, Chad Hauschild, and their new film, Corruptor. Carissa and I were on set a little bit helping out with them, and what I was really impressed with is they had it organized enough that it was pretty much 2 takes for every shot, 2 takes or one. I mean, they just moved, and compared to how many we take, I mean, if an actor was struggling with their performance, we hit 17 takes at one point, 14 takes. I mean, just huge numbers that take so long to comb through.
Yeah. There's a YouTube featurette that for my movie Outpost Doom. I made this comedic thing where it's actually one scene, like a shot, but I was up to take 35.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm not that bad.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. So, and that's one of those things you got to learn, and you learn this as a filmmaker. You're like, wow, man, how can I really improve this thing? And I think everybody gets better each subsequent film because they learn from their mistakes. And a lot of the DIY, micro budget stuff is a lot of it is you're just learning from your mistakes. You get in the editing room, you're like, oh my God, I framed this terribly. How I can't fix it? Well, next film I do, I'm going to be able to fix that, and that's in my mind and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting, time-consuming process. That's for sure.
It is, and I mean, we did a solid month of rehearsals before filmmaking, and I am a huge believer in rehearsals. But even still, in that short a window of rehearsal time, we would have actors come. And we really hadn't gone through a scene. And so if it just isn't jiving, that's what I found would skyrocket our take so much is when I felt like the performance was off.
Yeah. And that's always the thing. Like, one of the easy tricks that I would always do in editing all that footage is if you have let's say the camera's on a tripod and it's a medium shot of actor X, and I see in the folder that there's 6 takes of that. Well, almost always, not every time, but almost always, the take you're going to want to use is one of the last takes.
Yep.
Because, the reason why you did 6, 7, 8, 9 takes is because you weren't happy with all the ones that came before it.
Uh-huh.
So that's another trick. Like if you shoot a million different shots and angles and stuff like that, always look towards like the end of those shots, because the last 2, maybe the last 3, those are the best ones. And that actually works for actors as well, because you can get an actor on set and the actor might run through the lines and it's bland and generic, but as you're instructing them and as they sort of get warmed up and into it, they get better and better things. And that's another reason why I am a big proponent of so many takes, is because I think unless you have actors that are just spot on, like professionals who know exactly what they're doing right away, the actors get better and better, and they get better performances the more takes you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you got to balance being able to do that many takes with how long it's going to take to actually shoot the movie. So that's where the balance comes.
And I think Hollywood, part of the reason they're able to shoot so quickly is the good directors rehearse. And they'll take 2 weeks, and every single day they're rehearsing. I mean, for us it was a month, but that's only 1 to 2 days a week.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's one of the issues in micro-budget filmmaking in Nebraska that's so difficult, is being able to get together with people to do script read-throughs all the time. For Blood Model, what we've been doing is we've been getting together on Google Hangouts, the whole cast, and doing script read-throughs on Google Hangouts before we eventually get to the stage where we do them in person. So I can sort of instruct people, like, I want you to do a little bit different here, until we get to the dynamic of actually being at the same room together. However, the issue is in Nebraska is a pretty wide state in terms of, like, people live all over Omaha, Lincoln, Grand Island, western portions. It's very difficult to get people in the same room to go through that for long periods of time over and over and over. And everybody around here has day jobs, and so it's just really, really tough. And I think that's one of the limitations of Nebraska micro-budget filmmaking, is just the ability to rehearse with people all the time. But technology is improving that. Like Google Hangouts, it's working great for us. I'm like, why didn't I do this before?
Cool. Yeah.
And all my other stuff. So yeah, Google Hangouts filmmakers, that's where it's at. We have an actor in Kansas City on Blood Model. We have actors in Omaha, and we have in the western part of Nebraska, and they can all get together from the privacy of their own couch, and we can go through the script. It's super, super great.
Nice.
So tell me a couple funny stories from the set of The Wolf's Robe.
Yeah. There's one that comes to mind, and that's because as I've been cutting it, I just keep laughing. So in this scene where our protagonist, he's kind of an anti-hero, Victor Hunt, who is the man disguising himself as this minister, he's in a room and he's calling his accomplice, who is Yvonne Sesden, and trying to figure out a way to get out of the country, because he's being hunted by the FBI for bank robbery. Well, during the scene, it's kind of that scene in all scripts where you have to explain what happened before the film. But if you just sat there with 2 characters and explained it, it would be insanely boring. And so in order to spice it up in the script, I had the family that Victor's staying with, this kind of country bumpkin family, in the background playing this game, and this game is so ridiculous. And I had one of my favorite actors to work with, who's in all my stuff, Wooly Wooldridge. His first name's Charles, but he goes by Wooly. He made up this game, and he had this giant petrified bone because he collects these fossils. And he's in the background making these pig squealy noise and waving this bone around and, like, jacking this bone off. And Victor, who's played by Will Griffey, who's a very talented, competent actor, but he just, every time he would look back into the room, he just lost it. And anytime there's something really funny, I feel like 90% of the time I'm a pretty professional person, but for whatever reason, that juvenile, like, sixth grade humor, I just can't handle it. And so when I would look and see what was going on, I would just crack up. And that was one of those nights where we racked up, 17 plus takes. And we see, because I cut our bonus features for our DVD, and in the blooper reel, I am crying. I'm laughing so hard. We got to a point where I just couldn't look at it. And I was like, Carissa, I trust you. I'm ruining every take. I can't watch this. It was so much fun. The poor actors were there for a ridiculous amount of time, but it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. So you have a DVD coming out soon, I take it?
Yes. So the DVD, we're sending it out to get them made and whatnot. So that way, at our premiere, you can buy the DVD at the premiere. That'll include bonus features. So all the deleted scenes, and we have a lot because my script is huge. All of our blooper reel, and that'll also be available at Prairie Lights Film Festival. So if you want to take the DVD home, that has just a lot of extras on it. That'll be available.
Awesome. I am definitely going to pick up one of those.
Sweet. And for our listeners, we should hopefully start selling that on our site soonish. So definitely by the time Prairie Lights Film Festival comes around or thereafter, we'll have some online options available. So just check the wolfsrobemovie.com, and we'll keep updating there.
Yeah, and I know there are going to be a number of films available from a bunch of different filmmakers at Prairie Lights Film Festival. I think the plan right now is we're going to have sort of like a booth set up in the lobby that people can go and like pick up discs from various filmmakers and stuff. And, of course, there will be the Prairie Lights sampler disc, which I think Community Watch is on, correct? I always forget I always forget the films that are going to be on there. I think there's like 8 films. I think Community Watch is one of those. So that will be available for free for anyone who gets a weekend pass. So definitely get one of those. And the last question I had about the Wolf's Robe that I wanted to ask you about, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past when we've chatted together. The vast majority of sort of like feature-length films that are made around here are of the horror variety. Lots of horror films are made in Nebraska for whatever reason. However, The Wolf's Robe is very different from the types of movies you sort of see around here. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious as to if, number one, did that cause any sort of difficulties in terms of, getting the process, like the project off the ground and people interested in it? And two, like what sorts of problems or difficulties have you run into since the film's been completed in terms of like getting it out there to people and making sure people are aware of it?
Absolutely. Well, it didn't hurt us at the beginning, I think, because our initial concept poster looked like a horror flick. So all these actors that came out to casting assumed, it's another horror flick. Literally for the first year and a half, everyone we talked to thought we were making a horror film. I think the challenge it's posed now in post, because you're right, all the filmmakers I know in Nebraska, it's largely horror. One director does kind of like gay-themed stuff, but all of them have essentially these built-in niche audiences. I mean, horror is bigger than a niche, but, these built-in audiences, and so it's really smart. Our challenge has been, I really feel this is a good film, and I think overwhelmingly during our editing screeners, that's the feedback we got, is people just being really impressed with the story. Our challenge is, I met with a distributor in Omaha who will finance films, and the compliment he gave me, which was awesome, is he said, this film played better than this picture that we just invested $2 million in that had Hollywood actors. Yours played better. And then, of course, the but comes, but the challenge is, how do you market it well? And how we're approaching it is, during our editing screeners, one thing we found is that because it deals so heavily with deception, with getting swindled, with religious fundamentalism, is people who were, identified as like, I'm a recovering Catholic, or I'm a recovering Adventist, or I'm a recovering whatever, who had been through kind of these really harsh pictures of religion, really resonated with the story and got a lot out of it. And so now it's kind of the approach of how, tapping into that market. I think the problem is there isn't this automatic channel of, with horror flicks, like we know exactly how to reach that audience. And so with this one, it's like, I know who my audience is. Now it's the challenge of building that platform to let that audience know, hey, this film was made for you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think a lot of filmmakers around here default to horror just because it's so easy to have an audience for it. Because one thing about horror fans is horror fans will watch literally anything. It does not matter if it's a $50 million high-budget Hollywood thing or a $5 backyard micro-budget indie thing. Horror fans will watch anything, and there's conventions for horror fans to go to, and everybody sells their movies at conventions and stuff. So it's also easier to make a return on that investment that you put into your movie because, if you spend $1,000 to make your movie and you go to a couple horror conventions with your DVDs, you're going to make that money back, no problem. So I think that's probably the main reason as to why horror is so prevalent around here. But once again, I have a lot of respect for you as a filmmaker, not only because of doing the test screenings and getting that feedback and constructive criticism, but also for making something that it's going to be really hard to sort of get that movie out there to people. And for anybody listening to this, I highly encourage you check out their world premiere because I've seen the film. I don't know if the cut I've seen is the finished
No.
cut. Okay.
It's a lot better now. It's a lot better.
It's even better. So the cut that I have seen that I've watched is really awesome, and there's been a few actors that have participated in the Wolf's Robe. I will not mention their names on air to embarrass them, but they've asked me. They're just like, so Matt, is this movie is it actually good? Have you seen it? I'm like, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen a version of it, and I've told all of them, I'm like, yeah, it's actually really good. I actually really appreciate what you've done with it and what you're attempting to do with it, and I think everybody should definitely watch it. So definitely go see it at the world premiere and then come again to Prairie Lights to watch it with a Community Watch and Jesse's Chili. So that's going to be like an interesting sort of 3-pack right there of films that also are sort of relate in a way. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't covered talking about either of your films, or throw out some information of where people can find you? Anything you want to add?
I think I just add, speaking of that target audience, anyone who's ever kind of had to live a lie for a stretch of time or had to, deal with a community that feels like they want you to be this certain picture of a person, or anyone who's ever been deceived. I know my grandma got like 14 grand taken from her from an online con artist. Anyone who's experienced any of those things, I really feel is going to resonate with this story and just with the problems of living a lie and with conning and just being a deceptive person, whatever end of the stick you kind of fall on when that happens. I really think this would be a great film for you and kind of foster a conversation around that. So, yeah, come on out. Again, check out our website, thewolfsrobemovie.com. We have all our information there. And we'd love to see you at one of our shows.
Absolutely. And once again, I vouch for the film. It's awesome. And we're very proud at Prairie Lights to be able to screen a film like this, which is so different from a lot of the other films that are made around here. So very cool. And you can find out more information again at prairielightsfilmfest.com. Go get your $10 weekend passes. You'll get to watch AJ's movies. You'll get to see his Q&A. We're going to have Mark Popejoy. He's going to hit him with a bunch of hard-hitting questions on the spot on that Saturday. And then for those of you who are interested in getting the Blu-ray of Flatwater Terrors and contributing to a bunch of local Nebraska film organizations, don't forget we have a screening at the Alamo Draft House in Omaha Friday, July 29th at 9 p.m. Come on out. There's going to be a Q&A session with all the filmmakers except me because I don't do Q&As. And it's going to be a fun time. You can go to Alamo Draft House website or prairielightsfilmfest.com and all of our Facebook, social media. And we also have, you can go to prairielightsfilmfest.com and there are the buttons on the right-hand side. We do have a YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, and Tumblr page as well. So you can sign up for all that social media crap if you want to. However you want to get your information. So thank you, AJ. This is great.
Thank you.
I said last week on the show that that you're too nice of a person, and I think this just proves my point. You're just too nice. You need to be. You need a little bit more anger and just
That's
sort of
what Will
bitterness.
said. My lead actor wanted me to yell at him all the time, and I'm not that person. Whatever. I've accepted it. And hey, last shout out I have. Seriously, those of you listening, Prairie Lights Film Festival is the heart of independent filmmaking in this state. I don't know of any other place in the state that showcases this many specifically Nebraskan filmmakers. So make it a point. Put it on your calendars.
Awesome. Thanks. October 7th, 8th, and 9th. I never say the dates. October 7th, 8th, and 9th.
That helps.
Yeah. That helps. That helps. So thank you once again, AJ. It was great. Another fantastic conversation with you. We need to do this more often. We need to
Agreed.
Go get some dinner at some point or something and just talk.
Yes,
shop.
And Carissa would really like that. She misses you.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I miss Carissa.
It needs to happen. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Next week, I don't know who we have as our guest, but we have another guest, and hopefully Josh will be back on the show. If not, I guess I'm going to have to either go solo or find another co-host.
I'll be your co-host.
There we go. There we go. Josh has already messaged me, and I'm just going to read this. This is a little sort of behind-the-scenes thing here. And Josh says, fuck technology. Hate to say it, but you may need a new co-host. I don't want to put people through this every week. I'm sorry. My shit sucks. So
threatened him that AJ is going to take over his job, so
will do. He's going to listen to this tonight, and he'll probably just send me a message, let AJ do it. So
and tell him that I will make a point to get edgy if that'll make me the co-host. So
there you go.
Watch
there
out,
you go.
Josh.
Cool. All right, everybody. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next Sunday.